All right, welcome to the channel again. Today I want to do a blog real quick on that Crowdstrike that happened that basically bred down a lot of the systems worldwide, basically. The reason I want to bring that up is because unfortunately that's just a part of a software that the update didn't work and it bred down the systems. And what that means is that there was a client that was incorporated into the desktops, which reminds me of another client or another system. If you remember Norton antivirus years ago, where you would install Norton, but it would just take over your computer quite a bit. It was very integrated into it to the point where it actually slowed things down. So this reminded me of that because a lot of people don't think that, how integrated is a particular piece of software, whether it be a client or a whole security suite. And this is a perfect example of what can happen if you have an update that doesn't work. Normally, if you have a problem with the program will crash, and that was the end of it. But because this is a little more integrated, since it's a security program, it basically brought down the whole computer, the whole system down. So that's one of the differences when you're integrating things a little more into your systems versus just having a separate program or a separate computer doing the security aspect of it, if you will. So you may have your servers and systems here, and outside of that, you may have other systems protecting your network and things like that. In this case, that's just wasn't the case, and the end result is, it brought down a lot of systems. Fortunately, it was just a bad update, and that just means, somebody's got to go and reboot the computer and, get that fixed. Take that old system out, or driver out, put a new one, or patch it, or whatever the case may be. So that would be an easy fix, but if you have a lot of computers, it just may take a little longer. Not the end of the world, that's just what happens. But that brings me to the next point, which is what I have mentioned before, which is the Gmail. Gmail is another example where I have been saying this for a long time. They have a good security, but their security can be very restrictive as well. For example, people who use these phones that they have from free phones or whatever they have, sometimes for whatever reason they need to change the phone and they get another phone. Every time you get a new phone, you have a new number. So every time you get a new phone and a new number, you need to bring that Gmail account into it to get your email or have access to your email and your contacts. The problem with that is that if your old phone, it's already disconnected, Google wants to contact or send you a message or a PIN number or whatever the case may be to your old number, which no longer works. And then you have other options to do it on your laptop or whatever it is, but it just doesn't work. So it got to the point where it just got very frustrated. And the last thing or last option that I saw is that you can recover your password, and they'll send it to your email in 30 days. 30 days, not an hour or two or whatever the case may be. So I needed to find a way to move this person from Google Gmail to something else so that you're not depending on the Gmail. Nothing against Gmail, it works when it works, but then when you have to make some changes like that, it can be very restrictive. So I finally figured that it was easier to just get Outlook, for example, set Outlook, and then for like their notes, they have Open Notes or OneNote. It's very basic what they do, so they're not really doing a lot, but they need access to the email and their contacts for the phone and the people they're calling. So what I found out, because I had already exported the emails with the contacts to an account in Outlook, I was able to set up Outlook on the new phone, and in order to get the contacts from there, all I did was synchronize the Outlook to Android, the contacts in Android. And you can look this up online. It's not a hard thing to do, but it is something that you will have to look up because there are different steps that you got to take. But once that is synchronized from Outlook to the Android, all the contacts are there. Obviously, you have to make sure you export all your emails and your contacts from Outlook to something else before you even try this. And I had done that because I had a feeling I was going to run into this again. And so that's why I exported everything. And sure enough, came up again. So once I did that, I was able to get all the contacts back. I was able to get emails, or at least the old emails, not the new emails. I'm going to wait for the verification, if it ever comes in 30 days, to access the other email and just forward them there, or whatever whatever it is. But I was able to get like all the contacts that he needed on there. So now I'm not depending on Google to get their contacts or their email. Somebody made another account for Google, which tends to happen when you can access your first email. So they can use that to update the apps on the phone or whatever they want to do. They don't use a lot of these apps, but that's all you need the Gmail account for once you move to something else. So not a very hard thing to do once you have the information, but trying to go from one to the other, if you haven't done any of that, or if you're just trying to get back, or not get back, but trying to get that new account into a new phone that you don't have, where you don't have your old one, it's just going to be painful. I've run into that so many times that it gets to the point where, you know what, let's just move on to something else. And that was a nice way to do it, because if it does happen again, all you need to do is download the Outlook client, connect it to the old or the new email, just put in their account in there, and just like anything else, you should be able to get them going right away without having to wait however long it is that Gmail makes you wait for. So that's just another example of having too much security in place, where it basically defeats the purpose of letting you use it normally, because it's so restrictive to the point where you can't do certain things. I have mentioned this time and time again before, I'm sure. But another example is I have a friend who's an admin as well, and I remember a long time ago we were doing something with the computers, and he brought his, and he tends to tweak things so much because he wanted to secure everything. And I got to use the computer for a second or two, and I told him, this is so slow, everything is just not working correct. And sure enough, because he was just tweaking everything so much, things had slowed down quite a lot, to the point where it was almost not usable. So that's just something you learn from experience and using different systems and different softwares. Something you learn to see and experience. Another good example is this insurance company, or health insurance company, that I was trying to access an account, and because you couldn't remember the secure, they have several security questions where you have to respond to those, and like 20, or not 20, but like a couple of years later, you may try to go back and log in and you can't remember any of that, even though you may have tried to write it down, but people don't remember where it is. It got to the point where it kept locking me out for like I think it was an hour or so. So eventually I contacted the administrator, and they said they have reset the account. Sure enough, as soon as I went to try to reset the password and everything, couldn't do it. It just wouldn't let me. The system just wouldn't do it because it needed to go through those steps. So I got to the point where I just had to call then the 800 number in order to talk to somebody and let them know that the account had to be reset, and this is were the steps that we were taking to try to access it. But in the end, we were just never able to do it. So everything was done by phone because you just couldn't do it online. It was just one of those things that was just that security options that they had. It was just horrible. You just couldn't access the account again. So just another example where security can be overly tight, if you will, or too integrated where you're basically leaving your users out. So that's another example of why you need to find the balance of where, you can secure things to a certain level, but if you overdo it, you're just gonna make it worse. So you don't want that. Another example is banks. Obviously everybody needs security, but in the end, it can be so restricted to the point where even you yourself, the owner of the account, will have a lot of problems trying to just make some changes if you need to. And that's pretty frustrating for the user. Just something that you have to keep in mind. And just going back to this Crowdstrike problem, if they didn't test that program or patch or whatever they had, it was a small thing, but it ended up causing a big headache for a lot. Not because it wasn't a good program, but if you were a small company and you didn't have a budget, because from what I hear, it's this systems or this security systems tend to be pretty expensive. So if you were a smaller company, you didn't have to worry about anything, because if you didn't use the software, you weren't, you didn't have any problems with it. But, or your systems were interrupted. So you were safe, and I'm sure a lot of them are going to be up and running before no time. But that's just what can happen when things can get too integrated where people are not being careful, and you end up with something like that. So just keep that in mind, and just don't overdo it. It's like food. You overdo it with food, it's gonna kill you. So it's just, you have to find that balance. We all like to eat, we all need to eat, but if you don't find that balance, it'll come back and bite you sooner or later. That's just a different example, if you will, but it basically applies to all the systems. And so I know there are some people who like to tweak every little thing here and there, and that's where you got to be careful. You don't want to be tweaking everything, because it'll bite you in the butt later on. I had another example where I knew someone who liked to tweak everything else. He wasn't this friend of mine, but he was somebody else. That he ended up tweaking some things on a server, and later on there was an update that we were trying to do, or we're trying to do something, and it couldn't be done because he literally had broken something on it. And obviously I don't know what he changed, because I wasn't told. He didn't tell me for whatever, but it's just something you have to be careful, because if not, it's going to give you a headache later on. And that's just what it is. But anyways, I just want to kind of talk a little bit about that, because that's just something I've seen over time that can happen. And if you're not careful, you can definitely go there, overdo it, and then you'll end up with a headache. So keep that in mind, and I hope everything's good now.